Hello. So we have had an overwhelming number of questions about certain things with the 2025 assessment, which, because 2023 got so messed up, has created quite a little bit of confusion. So what I have today is a brief presentation. My goal is less than 5 minutes to talk through those things that I'm seeing people ask over and over and over again. You can see from the little agenda slide that I put together, number one thing is to explain the assessment notices for 2025 because they are a little bit different than you've seen in the past. And then I also want to explain the implications of the STC's May 2025 order that the county did agree to comply with while we're still battling out. The county executive, Frank White, is refusing to comply with the earlier order, which would have actually rolled back the 2023 assessment. This order in May of 25 is helpful for a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of examples of that. So I'll walk through that. And then, of course, the senior tax freeze. It's still relatively new. This is the first time you've seen an assessment notice where, if you're approved, it might show you an estimate of how much your senior tax freeze is saving you. And then finally, kind of when to appeal, and and if you choose to appeal, a couple of resources that you might find helpful. So just to move on, we will go to the next slide. So this is the front page. I accidentally skipped to the back page. Accidentally, I went 2 pages forward, but this is the front page of your assessment notice. And I trimmed out some information so that this taxpayer's confidential information wouldn't be displayed. But the bottom line is you see the main thing is this table that shows your prior value. Now, this is your 2024 value. So that's a little confusing. And as we talk about the STC order and how those calculations work, which is explained here in this verbiage, but explaining math with long sentences is sometimes confusing to people. So I have a couple slides here in a minute that'll kind of walk through that for you. But basically, here you have for residential parcels, you have the prior value and then the estimated value, what the assessor believes your home is worth as of 2025, and that is specifically as of January 1st, 2025. One thing that has confused people is that they've seen that the STC order had something about 15%, and then they see residential at 19%. This residential at 19% is the same as it's always been. It's dictated by state statute. That's different than the percentage increase that you're experiencing. This 19% is really if your home is worth $559,000, then to calculate your taxes, we multiply the 559,000 times 19% and then times the relevant levy rates for your property to determine what your actual tax liability is. So bottom line on this is the main number to focus on here is this estimated value for your residential property. We've also had some residential properties who were converted to commercial without any forewarning. I'm going to be addressing that in a piece of legislation and in a future video. So if that's happened to you, stick around, follow through this, but also be aware you'll see more information about that in the future. So then we get to the back page of this assessment notice, and this is what's really new. You can see at the top here, trying to find my cursor. There it is, trying to circle this. It says, congratulations as a participant in Jackson County Senior Property Tax Credit Program for 2024. The estimated savings on your 2025 tax bill is $958.74. And then it lists all the different taxing jurisdictions that you might be paying taxes to, what their levy rate is, what that estimates to taxes based on that $559,000 valuation that the assessor assigned. And then, since this person's property value went up between 2025 and 2024, what the estimated senior tax freeze is. So, and then of course, what they estimate your actual tax liability to be. June 30th is the deadline to apply for the senior tax credit. If you haven't done it and you're 62 or older, I encourage you to do so. And we'll move on from here. But the bottom line is this taxpayer got that. Now, if your tax bill went down between 24 and 25 and you're in the senior tax credit program, then you'll see no values here because your tax went down. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So this is maybe the most important slide here. And I'm going to have to probably take a little more time on it than I want. But at the end of the day, what I do want you to do is to think about these three methods. And then in the next slide, you'll understand why. So the first, over here in this left-hand column, is what the STC May 2025 order allowed or mandated as a maximum allowed assessed value. To get this value, you have to go find your 2022 value, multiply it times 1.15, and that's what the baseline is for your 2025 assessment. But then to get to your actual maximum value for 2025, you would multiply that, the 2025 baseline, times 1.15 again, and that is now the maximum that the STC says that your home can be valued at for 2025. Now, there's exceptions if you remodeled or had some new construction. I won't get into those details here, but to just really simplify it, in this example, I had a homeowner whose 2022 value was $100,000. And all I did is I typed in $100,000 times 1.15 times 1.15, and that came out to $137,500. That's the most that the assessor can value your property at in 2025, unless you had new construction. And that's per the STC order. So if you want to figure out how to get your 2022 value, because it's not on your notice, which is probably an oversight, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a link at the end of this presentation, and I'll put it in the comments for this video as well. But if you go to Jackson County Ascend, that's the website that if you Google that, that's the website where you can look up your 2022 value based on your parcel ID. And I have an example of that toward the end of this presentation. Now, for some people, the STC ordered maximum is going to be a little higher than what the county executive promised you the maximum would be. That calculation's a little bit simple. That calculation is simply the prior value times 1.15, and that's the value that the county executive promised you we wouldn't go above. So in this example, the 2024 value that you can find on your assessment notice, let's say a homeowner had a $200,000 property and it goes up by 15%, that's $230,000. So that one's pretty easy. And then finally, and this is maybe the most important, what's really the value of your home? Because even if those maximums are complied with, we still want to make sure that you haven't been overassessed. And what that means is that you need to understand what the marketplace might value your home at in its current condition. My best suggestion for those is to ask a real estate agent for a market value analysis if you're so inclined, or even easier than that is if you go to Zillow or Redfin, those are two really popular websites, and you enter your address, you'll get a pretty good idea of what the marketplace for your home might look like right now. So these are, in effect, three different ways to calculate or understand what the value of your home is. And here's the thing, is that if the assessor estimated your value higher than whatever the lowest of these three numbers is, then you should still appeal. And I'm going to provide you the link to the appeal website. I'm not going to walk through those steps in order to keep this video short, but absolutely, you should appeal if your 2025 value that's on your assessment notice is higher than whatever the lowest of these three calculations or estimations that I just gave you. I hope that makes sense, because this is just, for me, as I'm just trying to make this as straightforward as possible so you can check these things yourself, because the number of people who are asking me, is their assessment notice right, has just been overwhelming, and I can't do them one at a time. So on to the senior tax freeze, because it's new. We've had some questions, and a lot of these questions have been answered in the past, but then this whole STC order has caused a little bit more confusion. So I just want to walk through this really quick. So the first thing, bullet number 1 over here, is that the freeze is a freeze on the amount you owe. It does not freeze your assessed value. I hope that that's clear. And I'm going to walk through examples here in a moment. And then if the amount that you owe in taxes goes down in 2025 compared to 2024, if you got a senior tax freeze in 2024, then you're going to be frozen at the new lower 2025 value. And again, my examples will walk through that. You won't need to reapply if your value goes down. So once you've applied and been approved, you should never have to apply again unless the Department of Collections at Jackson County changes the rules at some time in the future, in which case we'd have to let you know. But I really don't expect that will happen anytime soon. So as long as you've applied and been approved, you're good to go. So let's just walk through these examples really quickly. In this example, I have a 2024 value that was on my home of $200,000. And I applied for the freeze and I was accepted. And so in this example, the taxes happen to be $4,500 for that home. Now, in 2025, my value goes up to $230,000. But I applied for and was approved for the senior tax credit. So what you'll see is that although the tax amount that I would owe on the 230,000 value might be $5,000, there will be a credit on my bill, and you saw an estimate of what that credit would be on page 2 of that assessment notice I showed earlier. And because you have that credit on your bill, you're still only paying $4,500, the same amount as the year that you were frozen. And what is really special about this senior tax program, year one, it might save you a little bit of money, might save you a lot of money, who knows? But as time goes by, your value is likely to continue to increase. That's what happens with the real estate market. So in this example, in 2027, a couple years from now, maybe my house is now worth $245,000. So with a $245,000 house, the calculation says I owe $5,500 in taxes. But no, I applied for the senior tax freeze in 2024, so I'm never going to pay more than this $4,500. So they put $1,000 credit now on my 27 bill, and that gives me a $4,500 tax bill. In this second example that I'm going to walk through, I want to just be really clear that this is just a hypothetical, but I've seen examples of this where people's assessed value went down in 2025. So in this example, same person with the same house, $200,000 house, owing $4,500 in taxes in 2024. But because of the STC order, or maybe they appealed in 2025 and the value of their home goes down. So now in 2025, they only owe $4,000 in taxes. And that means that they won't see any value in the senior tax freeze. It'll be zero because the value went down. There's nothing to deduct. But let's say that in 2027, their value went up to $245,000. Well, now in 2027, they would have had to pay $5,500, same as in the example above. Only now, because they appealed or got their value lowered in 2025, now they get a $1,500 senior tax credit, and they only owe $4,000. So the bottom line is, whatever the lowest amount that you ever get on a tax bill while you're frozen, that becomes the go-forward amount that you'll always be frozen at. So then this last page is just showing you a couple of links, and I will also drop them into the notes for this video on YouTube. So it's important you watch this on YouTube, because if you see a link on Facebook, chances are these links won't be there for you. But if you go to YouTube, they will be. So the first thing is, some people wanted to read the full State Tax Commission order. So there's a link that I'll provide for that. The second thing is the page where I said you could look up your 2022 value. I'll provide a link for that. And I want to show this. This is what that page looks like. You can see that there's little red asterisks that say they're mandatory: street address, business, or last name. Ignore those two. Simply put in your parcel number. Make sure you include the dashes. But if you enter anything in these other fields, then you won't get a result. You won't be able to see your property listed and be able to check your value. So I would just say only put in the parcel number in the property account number field. And then the last thing is, if it's appropriate for you to appeal, based on what I said earlier, then I will provide a link to the Board of Equalization. There's a lot of info there. And one of the things that's there is a button that looks just like this that says file a 2025 appeal. So those are the basic things that I wanted to go over with you today. And I hope this was helpful. In this video, I have answered 90% of the questions that I got. I've tried to keep it short. I hope it's helpful.